All right, pre-calc section 2.1. This is a very shortened version of what I've done in the past, mainly because it's parabolas and you have had a lot of parabola study in past courses. I just wanted to review like what you need to know going forward because in this chapter 2 we are going to start working on all kinds of polynomial equations. So this is kind of like the basic information you need to know. And also I'm putting 2.1 in chapter 10 because it's still parabolas, just to keep it together. And then we'll take a quiz over parabolas and hyperbolas all together. All right, let's see, what are we reviewing? Finding x-intercepts. So there's 3 different methods that are really mainly used to find x-intercepts, but all of these, finding x-intercepts, you need to make y equal to 0. And then how many x-intercepts are possible? Well, that's going to depend on how everything's set up, but the number of x-intercepts for a parabola, what's possible, since it's x squared, that degree up there is telling us 2 maximum. But we could have 1 or we could have none. That degree, so for quadratics, it's always going to be 2. The degree is telling us the maximum number of of x-intercepts. All right, so our first method would be solving by square roots, which could also be solving by complete the square. If you look at question A, and these coordinate to what we're going to use, question A is in vertex form. So question A would be a question that either you took an equation and put it into vertex form, or it was already given to you in vertex form. We're going to solve this by square roots. So first of all, make y 0. And then we're going to solve for x, so move the 8. Then divide everything by 2. And then at this point you have to square root. Remember, when we square root, we plus minus. So we're going to get 2 solutions. So now I'm going to add 3 to both sides. I'm also going to rearrange this. I like when x is on this side. I can't help it. So I'm going to have 3 plus or minus 2. Now I can add 3 plus 2 and I can subtract 3 minus 2. So I am going to find both of those. Our first one is going to be 3. Well, let's start with 3 minus 2. And our second one is going to be 3 plus 2. So we'll get 1 and 5. So our x-intercepts are going to be 1, 0, and 5, 0. I like to put these in numerical order from left to right. This says also find the y-intercept. So to find the y-intercept, we make x 0. Okay, make x equals 0. So I'm going to take this equation and plug in 0 for x. So when I have f of x and I make x 0, x 0, f of 0, I get 2 times 0 minus 3 squared minus 8. So 2 times negative 3 squared minus 8. So 2 times 9 minus 8, 18 minus 8. F of 0 is 10. So my x-intercept, just kidding, y-intercept is 0, 10. Okay, so again, that was if we have it in vertex form or we use complete the square to put it into vertex form. Question B, this is in standard form. This is ax squared plus bx plus c. This is in standard form. So to find the x-intercepts, we're going to make y 0. Now, I gave you a question that cannot be factored, so I'm going to show you how to solve this by using the quadratic formula. Remember, we have a song. Oh gosh, do I get to sing it? I do. X equals opposite b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so we are going to plug in that information. X equals opposite of b, so b is -4. I'm going to put +4. Plus or minus square root b squared, 16 minus 4 times 1 times 1, all over 2 times 1. So when I have 4 plus or minus square root, this is 16 minus 4, 12 over 2. And we're going to simplify that square root 12. 4 plus or minus, that will be 2 radical 3 over 2. Now I do notice that on top, both terms have a greatest common factor. So I'm going to factor out the 2 from the numerator. I'll do it in different colors so you can follow. I'm factoring out 2. I have left over 2 plus or minus square root 3 over. On the bottom, I'm also going to factor out a 2, and then I just have times 1 left over. If you factor them, you may cancel them. If you factor them, you may cancel them. If you do not do the factoring step, you cannot cancel. So I get x equals 2 plus or minus square root 3. So to say that those are x-intercepts, we would have 2 plus, oh shoot, I meant to start with minus. Minus radical 3 comma 0 and 2 plus radical 3 comma 0. So those would be the x-intercepts. X-intercepts are written as ordered pairs. To do the y-intercept, we make x 0. So f of 0 is equal to 0 squared minus 4 times 0 plus 1. So f of 0 is equal to 1. When it's in standard form, finding the y-intercept is super easy. It's that last constant that does not have any x's. So the y-intercept would be 0, 1. All right, and then the third case would be solving by factoring. So we're going to make y equals 0, and we're going to factor x squared minus x minus 56. Now they have to have different signs. 56 would be 7 and 8, making 7 the positive and 8 the negative. And when we factor it and we set each factor equal to 0, and we have our x-intercepts. Now to find the y-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for all of our x's, and I get my y-intercept is at negative 56. So 0, negative 56 would be the y-intercept. Okay. Now we're going to go over completing a square to put a quadratic into vertex form. And then we're going to find the vertex. We're going to say if it is a minimum or a maximum. We're going to find the x-intercepts and the y-intercept. All right, first of all, putting it into vertex form. I would only recommend doing this, if I don't have to, I would only recommend doing it if the middle term is positive. Not positive, oh I lied, even if it's divisible by 2. So remember when we do complete the square, you have to divide that number by 2. All right, so to complete the square, first of all, f of x, I'm going to just move that 5 over. and I'm going to add a square. On the other side, x squared minus 4x, add a square. Okay, and then we divide the middle term by 2, and then we square it, and we get 4. Add that to both sides. So I have f of x plus 9 equals, and then I'm going to factor that while I'm at it, x minus 2 squared. Okay, and then we're going to subtract 9 to both sides. And it is in vertex form. All right, then we need to find the vertex. Okay, so the vertex would be at 2, negative 9. Is that a minimum or maximum? So the minimum or maximum, I'm going to draw a picture up here. Minimum would be if the vertex was the lowest point in the whole parabola. The maximum would be if the vertex was the highest point in the whole parabola. So a minimum would be if the a value is positive, maximum would be the a value is negative. So here I've got just a positive in front of my x minus 2 squared. So this is going to be a minimum. It's going to open up. The x-intercepts. So to the x-intercepts, we're going to set this equation equal to 0, or actually, I could set either of them equal to 0. It's really up to you which one you want to use. I'm thinking I'm going to use this one because I can see that it factors, and I think that's the fastest way. You can use this one as well. I showed you how to do it on the previous page. I'm going to use factoring for it. So for the x-intercepts, 0 equals x squared minus 4x minus 5. I'm going to factor that. X minus 5 and x plus 1. And so I get a positive 5 and a negative 1. So my x-intercepts are at negative 1, 0 and positive 5, 0. And then we need to find the y-intercept, and again I'm going to use the original because it's easier to find the y-intercept in this form than it is in vertex form. But again, you can plug in 0 here. It's totally up to you when you do it. F of 0 equals 0 squared minus 4 times 0 minus 5. So f of 0 equals negative 5. My y-intercept is at 0, negative 5. All right, example 3. All right, let's see. I'm going to move g of x, I'm going to move over that 8, minus 8 plus a square equals, and then we have negative x squared plus 3x plus a square. Here I have a problem because you cannot complete the square if there is a number in front other than a 1. This is a negative 1. So we have to GCF negative 1 out of all three terms. So my next step is going to look like g of x minus 8 plus square equals negative 1 parenthesis x squared minus 3x plus, and now it's not a square anymore. It's a different number. So I'm going to complete the square with this one. I'm going to take negative 3 and I'm going to divide it by 2 and I'm going to square it. That's going to give me 9/4. But I do not put 9/4 over here because in order to have 9/4 I had to have divided it by negative 1. So to go back to the other side, the square is going to be 9/4 times negative 1. Negative 9/4 goes over there. So now I have g of x, g of x let's see, in order to combine these, we have to have a common denominator. So my minus 8 has to turn into 32/4. And on the other side, -1, and I'm going to factor it, x minus 3/2 squared. Remember, whatever you did before you squared it is what goes here. So I just found that. So you combine these, g of x minus 41/4. And then we add the 41/4 to the other side. G of x equals negative, I'm just not going to put the 1, negative x minus 3/2 squared plus 41/4. All right, so that is vertex form. So we can find our vertex. And the vertex is one of the most important things about the parabola, so being able to find the vertex, that's why we're doing complete the square. 3/2, 41/4. Is this a maximum or minimum? Well, because it's negative in front, it's going to open down, so that's going to make this a maximum. What's next? X-intercepts. I would say if you want to use this one, we're going to use quadratic formula, or if we use this one, we're going to use square roots. I'm just going to go off of this one here. You're more than welcome to try quadratic formula and see that you get the exact same answer if you know that that's the formula that you're going to use over complete the square. That's totally fine with me. Just pause the video and make sure that you get the same answer. I'm going to use this one here. So I'm going to do 0 equals negative x minus 3/2 squared plus 41/4. Move that over. Negative 41/4 equals negative x minus 3/2 squared. Divide or multiply both sides by -1. I'm going to square root both sides, which means plus minus. I'm also going to rearrange it. X minus 3/2 equals plus minus square root 41. And as I'm doing this, you square root the 41. And you have to square root the 4. So this is going to be square root 41 over 2. And then I'm going to add the 3/2 to both sides. X equals 3/2 plus or minus square root 41 over 2. Or we can rewrite it as 3 plus or minus square root 41 all over 2 because they already had a common denominator. So my x-intercepts are going to be written, oh, this is, I don't have a lot of space, are going to be written as 3 minus square root 41 over 2, comma 0, and 3 plus square root 41 over 2, comma 0. You know, I would probably be fine with you just doing 3 plus or minus square root 41 over 2, comma 0. I'm just trying to like think about the way you'll answer questions in the future. Just want to make sure you've seen it both ways. All right, and then the final thing we have to do is the y-intercept. I'm going to use the original question for this, the y-intercept, if I plug in 0 for x. G of 0 equals negative 0 squared plus 3 times 0 plus 8. So G of 0 is 8. My y-intercept is 0, 8. All right, and then we've got one more put into vertex form. Again, if you want to pause the video, try it on your own, and then unpause it, make sure you did it right. Be really good practice. I'm going to move the 7 over, put a square, equals 2x squared plus 8x, put a square. All right, when I go to complete the square, I can't yet because there's a 2 in front. So I have to GCF 2x squared plus 4x plus not a square. So what goes in here? We're going to take 4 divided by 2 squared, so 2 squared is 4. But 4 does not go over here because these are two different symbols. I have to take 4 times 2, so 8 is what goes on the other side. F of x plus 1 equals 2 parenthesis x plus 2 squared. So f of x equals 2 times x plus 2 squared minus 1 is the vertex form. All right, what's next? Vertex. So the vertex would be -2, -1. This has a positive in front, so this is a minimum. X-intercepts. How do I want to do x-intercepts? Doesn't look like it's going to factor easily, so I'll just use this and put in 0 for y. Again, you can use quadratic formula as well. I just think that complete the square is easier to solve if it's already in vertex form. Oops, sorry. -1 equals 2 times x plus 2 squared, so that's going to be -1/2 equals x plus 2 squared. I'm going to square root both sides. Plus minus, and now I've got an issue because this does not work. So let me find my y-intercept, and then we're going to come back to this right here. Find my y-intercept right over here. I'm going to find the y-intercept by just plugging in 0 into the original. 0 equals 2 times 0 squared plus 8 times 0 plus 7. 7. So the y-intercept is at 0, 7. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Desmos, because this is what I envision you having trouble at home, like getting something and you're like, wait, that can't be right. So I'm going to go to Desmos and I'm going to type in just the original question. Let's see, 2x squared plus 8x plus 7. And this tells me that I've done something wrong. So what have I done wrong? So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to look and see what have I done wrong. And you guys probably watching this video already knew that I did something wrong. But just looking at Desmos, I could see, okay, there are x-intercepts, but this is telling me that there's no x-intercepts. So I'm going to go through my work, and here's my mistake. I moved the -1 over, but I didn't actually add it. And that tends to happen when you skip steps and you go really fast. So this should actually be +1. So this should be +1/2. So let me go back and finish this here. Excuse me. Where was I? Let's switch sides. X plus 2 equals plus minus, we've got square root of 1 over square root 2. I'm going to add 2 to, or sorry, subtract 2 to both sides. X equals -2 plus or minus, let's see, square root 1 is 1 over square root 2. Now you all should know we don't leave square roots in the denominator, so we're going to rationalize it. X equals -2 plus or minus square root of 2 over 2. So you can either write your x-intercepts in this form, or we could find a common denominator and write them as -4 plus or minus radical 2 all over 2, comma 0 for our x-intercepts. And you saw on my Desmos that it was an irrational, it was not a nice number. So I could, just double check on my calculator. -4 plus square root 2 over 2 And that's one of the answers. And that is the other answer. So now I've done it correctly. Sorry. I was doing this on my calculator, but I had it open to Desmos, so he didn't see me doing it. There we go. So that gives me the two answers that the Desmos calculator told me. All right, the very last part of these notes, writing an equation of a parabola given the vertex and another point on the parabola. So if we are given the vertex here and any other point, we can use this form to solve for what the a value is, because that's basically what they're not giving me is what is a. They're giving me x, h, and k, but they're not giving me a. So right here, I'm going to look at the 0, 0 as being the x and the f of x in the equation. And I'm going to write f of x, so 0, equals a, we don't know the value of that. And then the x value is 0 minus the h value, so vertex is hk. So what is it? 0 minus 1 squared. If you forget the squared, you will get this wrong. Please don't forget the squared. Plus k, which is 2. And now we're going to solve for our a value. So negative 2 equals a times 1. Just divide by 1, which you don't really have to do. And we get a equals negative 2. So our equation should be f of x equals our a value negative 2 times x minus 1 squared plus 2. You could use Desmos to check it. Go to Desmos, type this in, make sure it passes through the point 0, 0, make sure it has a vertex at 1, 2. Write the standard form of a parabola whose vertex is 4, negative 1 and passes through the point 2, 3. So the vertex is hk and the point is going to be x comma f of x. So we'll do f of x, 3, equals a times x, which is 2, minus h, which is 4, squared, plus k, negative 1. So I'm going to add that 1. 4 equals a times negative 2 squared. So 4 equals a times 4. So a has to equal 1. So f of x equals 1 times x minus 4 squared minus 1. That would be our vertex form.